Most soldiers who saved D-Day did it with guns. Curtis Culin did it with a welding torch. June 1944. The invasion was failing, not because of German tanks, because of bushes. Hedgerows, 800 years old, killing American tanks faster than they could be replaced. Then a mechanic from New Jersey said, "What if we just weld scrap metal to the front?" His commanding officer laughed. 48 hours later, his invention saved the invasion. This is that story. June 12, 1944. 6 days after D-Day. The world is watching. 156,000 Allied troops have stormed the beaches of Normandy. Omaha was a slaughter. Utah went smoother. The British and Canadians fought through sword, Juno, and gold. By nightfall on June 6th, the Allies had their foothold. Tenuous, bloody, but there. Now comes the hard part. The plan is simple on paper. Break out of the coastal defenses, push inland, race across France before the Germans can organize a counterattack. Speed is everything. Every day the Allies stay bottled up near the beaches gives the Germans time. Time to bring in reinforcements. Time to dig in. Time to turn France into a fortress. So the Allies push. And they hit a wall. Not a wall made of concrete or steel. A wall made of bushes. Sergeant Curtis G. Culin watches it happen for the first time on June 8th, 2 days after the landing. He's a reconnaissance sergeant with the 102nd Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron. His job is to scout ahead, report enemy positions, stay alive. Before the war, he was a mechanic in Cranford, New Jersey. Fixed cars and trucks. Good with his hands. Good at seeing how things worked. The Army made him a tanker, then a scout, but he's still a mechanic at heart. When something's broken, he wants to fix it. Right now, he's watching something break in real time. A Sherman tank, 30 tons of American steel, approaches a hedgerow. Not the decorative hedges you'd see in a suburban yard. This is bocage, the French word for this nightmare. An earthen wall, 4 feet high, 15 feet thick at the base, made of compacted soil, stone, and the tangled roots of hawthorn, oak, and blackberry bushes. The roots go down 10 feet or more. Some of these hedgerows are older than the Norman conquest of England in 1066. They were never designed as fortifications. They were just farmers dividing their land, keeping cows from wandering. 800 years of agricultural engineering, and now in June 1944, they're the most effective tank obstacle in Europe. The Sherman's commander pops his hatch, looks at the hedgerow. He knows what's coming. They all do. But orders are orders. Take that field. Advance. The tank guns its engine. Black smoke pours from the exhaust. 30 tons of steel accelerates toward the wall. 10 miles per hour. 15. 20. The treads churn up mud and grass. The front tilts up as the tank tries to climb. Higher. Higher. The belly is exposed now. 25 millimeters of armor. That's it. Between the crew and whatever's waiting on the other side. Cullen watches through his binoculars. He can see the tank's underside, vulnerable, naked. On the other side of the hedgerow, invisible to the tank crew, a German soldier crouches with a Panzerfaust. He's 19 years old, terrified, but he's been trained for this exact moment. When you see the belly armor, you fire. The tank is still climbing, almost vertical now. The engine screaming. The German soldier stands, aims. Whoosh. The Panzerfaust rocket streaks across 20 meters in less than a second. The Sherman crew doesn't see it coming. The first they know is the impact. The rocket punches through the 25 millimeters belly armor like it's paper. It can penetrate 200 millimeters. This is nothing. The warhead detonates inside the crew compartment. Superheated metal fragments, overpressure, shrapnel. The driver dies instantly. So does the bow gunner. The commander has 2 seconds to realize what happened before the ammunition cooks off. 76 millimeter shells, 30 caliber belts, all igniting at once. The explosion lifts the 30-ton Sherman 6 inches off the ground. When it settles, smoke pours from every hatch. The fuel ignites a moment later. Now it's an oven. Culin lowers his binoculars. He's seen men die before. This is war. Death is everywhere. But this feels different. This feels stupid. 5 men just died because they tried to climb over a hedge. Not because the Germans had better tanks, not because of superior tactics, because of 800-year-old bushes planted by farmers to keep livestock penned in. Something about that sits wrong in Cullen's gut. But there's nothing he can do about it. He's a sergeant, not a general, not an engineer. His job is to scout and report. So he makes a note in his log, Sherman destroyed at hedgerow, grid reference, and moves on. He watches it happen again the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. By June 12th, 6 days after D-Day, Culin has watched 12 tanks die the exact same way. 12 Shermans, 60 crewmen, all because of the same problem. The tanks have to go over the hedgerows. When they go over, they expose their belly armor. When the belly is exposed, the Germans kill them. Simple, efficient, repeatable. The American advance has stalled. Not because they're losing battles, because they can't move through the terrain. Normandy is a maze. Thousands of these hedgerows, tens of thousands. Every 100 to 200 yards, another wall. Every field is a potential death trap. The generals are frustrated, the infantry is frustrated, the tank crews are terrified. Nobody has a solution. And then, on the evening of June 12th, Curtis Culin has a thought. It's not a dramatic moment. He's not struck by lightning or blessed with divine inspiration. He's just sitting in a foxhole, eating cold rations, thinking about the problem. The tanks aren't the problem. The Sherman is a good tank, reliable, well-armored from the front. The hedgerows aren't the problem either. They're just obstacles, stone and roots and dirt. The approach is the problem. Why are they going over the hedgerows? What if they went through them instead? Keep the frontal armor facing forward. The front of a Sherman can stop most German anti-tank weapons. But you can't just drive through a hedgerow. The roots are too thick, the earth too compacted. The Sherman would just get stuck. Unless, what if you gave the tank something to cut through it? Steel prongs, welded to the front, angled down and forward, like the tusks of a boar. Ram the hedgerow at speed, the prongs dig into the earth and roots, the weight and power of the tank do the rest. Culin pulls out his notebook, starts sketching. 4 prongs, maybe 5, fixed steel, reinforced joints, welded directly to the tank's hull. Simple. Almost stupidly simple. But nobody else has thought of it. He stares at the sketch for a long time. Is this actually a good idea? Or is it just desperation talking? He's not an engineer. He's a mechanic, a sergeant. What does he know about tank modifications? But then he thinks about those 12 Shermans, those 60 men. And he thinks, what if I'm right? What if this actually works? What if this is the solution everyone's been looking for, and it's just been sitting here waiting for someone to see it? He closes the notebook. Tomorrow, he'll talk to his CO. Tomorrow, he'll find out if he's a genius or an idiot.
Part 2. Permission and Scrap Metal. June 13th, 1944. Morning. Culin finds Captain Samuel Morrison in a makeshift command post, a half-blown-off farmhouse. Morrison is studying maps. Frustrated. Every officer in Normandy is frustrated. "Sir, I have an idea about the hedgerows." Morrison doesn't look up immediately. He's heard a lot of ideas in the past week, most of them useless. "Let's hear it, Sergeant." Culin explains. Steel prongs, welded to the front of the tank, drive through the hedgerows instead of over them. Morrison finally looks up, stares at Culin for a long moment. "You want to modify tanks in a combat zone using untested equipment based on an idea you came up with while eating rations in a foxhole?" "Yes, sir." It sounds insane when Morrison says it like that. "And if it doesn't work?" Culin swallows. "Then we're no worse off than we are now, sir. Tanks are dying anyway." Morrison can't argue with that. He taps the map with his finger. "You have 48 hours. Build a prototype. If it works, I'll push it up the chain. If it doesn't..." He doesn't finish the sentence. He doesn't need to. If it doesn't work, Culin will be known as the sergeant who wasted time and resources on a failed experiment while men died. "Thank you, sir." Morrison waves him off. "Don't thank me yet. Thank me if it works." Now Culin needs materials. Steel. Thick steel. Strong enough to withstand ramming a stone wall at 20 miles per hour. Where do you find heavy steel in a combat zone? He thinks for a moment. Then it hits him. The beaches. 6 days ago, when the Allies landed, the Germans had prepared for them. Thousands of obstacles planted on the beaches, designed to stop landing craft, rip open hulls, destroy tanks. One type of obstacle was called a Czech hedgehog. 3 steel beams, each 6 feet long, welded together in the shape of a massive jack, like something a giant would play with. Made of solid steel, hardened, heavy. The invasion bypassed most of them, went over them, around them, through them. Now they're littering the beaches. Scrap metal. Useless to the Germans, perfect for Culin. He requisitions a cutting torch and a work crew. 4 men, all volunteers, none of them sure what they're doing, but willing to try. "We're going shopping," he tells them. They look at him like he's crazy. They drive to Omaha Beach. The beach is still a disaster zone. Wrecked landing craft, burned-out tanks, craters from artillery. And everywhere, Czech hedgehogs. Thousands of them, just sitting there. German engineering, meant to stop the invasion. Now they're going to save it. Culin picks one, tests the welds with a hammer. Solid. "This one," he says. They fire up the cutting torch. The work is brutal. The steel is thick, hardened. It fights back. The torch screams, sparks fly, salt spray from the ocean mixes with metal smoke. It takes an hour to cut apart one hedgehog. They need at least 4 prongs, maybe 5. Culin does the math. They have 48 hours. This is going to be tight. By the end of the first day, they have 4 prongs cut. Each one is 4 feet long, thick as a man's leg, heavy as railroad track. Culin sharpens the tips with a grinder, reinforces the joints with extra steel. By midnight, his hands are blistered and his back is screaming. But the prongs are ready. Tomorrow, the hard part. welding them to a tank.
June 14th, 1944, dawn. Culin hasn't slept. He spent the night planning the welds, calculating angles, drawing diagrams. The prongs have to be positioned exactly right. Too high and they'll just push the hedgerow instead of cutting through it. Too low and they'll dig into the ground and stall the tank. The angle matters, the spacing matters, the strength of the welds matters. One mistake and the whole thing fails. They bring in a Sherman, an older model, seen some combat, a few dents in the armor, but functional. The crew has been briefed. They know this is experimental. They know it might not work. They volunteered anyway. Culin respects that. He marks the hull with chalk, shows his crew where each prong goes. Here, and here, and here. They position the first prong, heavy, awkward. It takes 3 men to hold it in place. Culin fires up the welding torch. The work is delicate. One bad weld and the prong will snap off under stress. The metal glows orange, white. The arc is blinding. He works slowly, methodically. Hours pass. The sun rises, gets hot. Culin is drenched in sweat. By noon, 2 prongs are welded, 2 to go. By late afternoon, all 4 are attached. Culin steps back, looks at his creation. It's ugly, brutal. The welds are rough. The prongs jut out at harsh angles. It looks like something cobbled together in a junkyard, which, technically, it is. Someone laughs, "It looks like a rhino." The name sticks. Captain Morrison arrives at 1600 hours, walks around the tank, examines the welds, tests the prongs with his boot. "All right, Sergeant, time to see if this works or if you've just ruined a perfectly good tank." Culin's stomach tightens. This is it. 48 hours of work, all the hope, all the risk. If this fails, it's over. They drive to a hedgerow that's been giving them problems all week. Thick, old, impenetrable. The kind that stopped 3 previous attacks. A dozen officers have gathered to watch. Word spread fast. Some of them look curious, some skeptical, some outright hostile. "This is a waste of time," one mutters. Culin hears it, ignores it. The Rhino's crew climbs in, buttons up. The engine rumbles to life. Morrison raises his hand. Culin holds his breath. Morrison drops his hand. The Sherman surges forward. The engine screams, 30 tons of steel accelerating, 10 miles per hour, 15, 20. The crew inside can't see the hedgerow anymore, just the wall of earth rushing toward them. The driver's knuckles are white on the controls. "Brace!" the commander shouts. Impact. The sound is like a freight train hitting a mountain. Earth explodes outward in a massive wave. Roots, thick as a man's arm, snap with sounds like rifle shots. Stones the size of basketballs ricochet off the tank's armor. The entire Sherman shudders, violent. The crew is thrown against their seats. Culin watches. The tank is buried in the hedgerow. Halfway through, the prongs are invisible, swallowed by earth and roots. The engine is screaming. Black smoke pours from the exhaust. But the tank isn't moving. 5 seconds pass. The longest 5 seconds of Culin's life. The officers shift uncomfortably. Someone mutters, "It's stuck." Morrison looks at Culin, doesn't say anything, doesn't need to. The message is clear. You just wasted our time. Inside the tank, the driver is screaming into the radio. "We're not moving. The prongs are caught on something." The commander's voice crackles back. "Keep the engine running. Full throttle." Culin feels his stomach drop. 48 hours of work. All the scavenged steel, the welding, the hope. For nothing. Then, something shifts. Deep inside the hedgerow, beneath the surface, one of the prongs bites into a massive root ball. The root is 800 years old, thick as a tree trunk.
but the prong is sharpened German steel, hardened, driven by 30 tons of force. Crack! The root snaps. The tank lurches forward, 6 inches, then stops again. Another root, even thicker. The engine is redlining, the entire Sherman vibrating like it's about to shake itself apart. The crew can feel it. They're being rattled like dice in a cup. Crack! The second root gives. The tank moves, a foot this time, then 2 feet. Then it explodes through, bursts out the other side of the hedgerow in a spray of dirt, shattered roots, and stones. The Sherman levels out. The prongs are bent, but intact. The frontal armor is facing forward. Perfect. The crew pops the hatches. The driver climbs out, grinning like a maniac. Smoothest hedgerow crossing I've ever made. The watching officers erupt, cheering, clapping, shouting. Morrison turns to Culin. His face is unreadable for a moment. Then he smiles. "How many of these can you make, Sergeant?" Culin exhales for what feels like the first time in 5 minutes. "As many as you need, sir." Morrison's smile widens. "I need 1,000.
The report goes up the chain of command at lightning speed. Captain Morrison to Major Williams, Williams to Colonel Mitchell, Mitchell to General Omar Bradley. By June 16th, 2 days after the successful test, Bradley himself has signed off. Mass production, every tank in Normandy. The order is simple. Equip all Sherman tanks with hedgerow cutting devices. Priority, urgent. But there's a problem. How do you manufacture 1,000 Rhino kits in a combat zone? There are no factories, no supply lines, no blueprints. Just Culin and his idea. The Army does what it does best, improvises. Field workshops are set up, welding stations, cutting stations. More Czech hedgehogs are scavenged from the beaches, thousands of them. Engineers arrive, ask Culin to explain the design. He shows him his original sketch, crumpled, stained with oil and sweat. They stare at it. "That's it? That's the whole design?" "Yes, sir." "No calculations? No stress analysis? No material specifications?" "It worked," Culin says simply, "so I built more." The engineers look at each other. One of them laughs. The best solutions are always the simplest. Culin trains welding crews, shows them the exact angles, the proper reinforcement techniques. The welds have to be perfect, he tells them. If a prong snaps off in combat, men die. They work around the clock. The sound of cutting torches and welding arcs fills the night. Sparks light up the darkness like fireflies. Within a week, 500 tanks have been modified. Within 2 weeks, 2,000. Within 3 weeks, nearly every Sherman in Normandy has steel tusks welded to its front. The troops start calling them rhinos. The name spreads, becomes official. The modification is designated the M1 Dozer kit in reports. But nobody calls it that. It's the Rhino, Culin's Rhino. And it's about to change the war. June 19th, 1944. The first large-scale combat test. A German strongpoint has been holding up the American advance for a week. Machine gun nests, anti-tank positions, mortar pits, all protected by hedgerows. The American infantry tried to take it twice, failed both times, heavy casualties. Now they're trying again, with rhinos. 6 modified Shermans lead the assault. The crews are nervous. They've heard about the test. They've heard it worked. But this is different. This is real combat. The Germans are waiting, confident. They've beaten back 2 attacks already. Their Panzerfausts are loaded. Their machine guns are zeroed in. They know the American tanks will try to climb the hedgerows, expose their bellies. It's worked every time so far. Then the rhinos appear. The first Sherman accelerates toward the hedgerow. The German soldiers watch, wait for the tank to tilt up. It doesn't. Instead, it hits the hedgerow head on. Steel prongs bite into earth and stone. The tank plows through. Clean breach.
frontal armor forward the entire time. The Germans panic. What the? Their defensive positions are suddenly useless. The anti-tank weapons can't hit the weak points. A Panzerfaust fires anyway, hits the Sherman's frontal armor, bounces off. The Sherman's 75mm gun rotates, fires. The German position explodes. One after another, the rhinos breach the hedgerows. 5 Shermans, all through, all intact, all guns blazing. The German strongpoint, which should have held for days, falls in 45 minutes. The after-action report is brief. Enemy defensive positions rendered ineffective by modified tanks. Minimal Allied casualties. Recommend immediate widespread adoption. But the recommendation is unnecessary. Every tank commander already wants a Rhino. Every infantry officer is requesting them for support. The weapon that stumped generals and engineers has been solved by a mechanic. By late June, the Germans realize something has changed. Suddenly, American tanks are breaching hedgerows without exposing their weak points. How? Captured intelligence reports show confusion. Enemy armor demonstrating new capability, able to transverse bocage obstacles without vulnerability period. Method unknown. Recommend immediate investigation. When they finally capture a damaged Rhino and examine it, the response is disbelief. A German engineering officer writes in his report, "The American solution is crude beyond belief. Simple steel prongs welded to tank hull. No sophisticated mechanism, no advanced technology, just brute force and metal. And yet, it works. Our defensive strategy relied on the bocage terrain. That advantage is now nullified. Recommend immediate countermeasures." The Germans try. They reinforce hedgerows with mines, position anti-tank guns at different angles, create fake hedgerows as traps. None of it works consistently. The fundamental problem remains. The rhinos keep the Sherman's thickest armor facing the enemy. German Panzerfausts can't penetrate Sherman frontal armor reliably. And when the Americans use proper combined arms tactics, infantry with the tanks, artillery support, the bocage becomes a killing ground for the Germans. July 25, 1944. The breakout begins. Operation Cobra. The plan to smash through German lines and race across France. Over 1,500 Rhino tanks, all equipped with Culin's invention. The artillery barrage starts at 9:38 hours. The largest concentrated bombardment since D-Day. 1,500 bombers, 3,000 tons of explosives. The earth shakes, the sky turns black. Then the tanks roll. The hedgerows that stopped the invasion for 6 weeks are obstacles no more. The rhinos plow through them like they're made of paper. German positions that should have held for days fall in hours. The advance that was supposed to take weeks takes days. By August 1st, American armor is racing across open country toward Paris. The bocage, the natural fortress, is behind them. And Curtis Culin's invention made it possible. Culin himself doesn't participate in Operation Cobra. He's been pulled from his unit, assigned to training duties, teaching welding crews, troubleshooting modifications, answering questions from engineers who still can't quite believe his design works. He hates it. "I'm not an engineer, sir," he tells Major Williams. "I'm a reconnaissance sergeant. I want to be with my unit." "Your unit doesn't need you, Sergeant. The entire army needs you." Williams pauses. "You've done more for this campaign than most generals." Culin doesn't feel like a hero. He feels like a mechanic who got lucky. But the awards come anyway. Legion of Merit, Bronze Star, promotion to Technical Sergeant. Newspaper reporters want interviews. The genius mechanic who saved the invasion. The sergeant who outsmarted the Germans. From New Jersey to Normandy, one man's invention changed the war. Culin refuses most of them. "I just welded some metal to a tank. Anybody could have done it." But that's not true. Thousands of men saw the hedgerow problem, hundreds of officers, dozens of engineers. Only Curtis Culin saw the solution. Simple, crude, effective.
Culin himself doesn't participate in Operation Cobra. He's been pulled from his unit, assigned to training duties, teaching welding crews, troubleshooting modifications, answering questions from engineers who still can't quite believe his design works. He hates it. "I'm not an engineer, sir," he tells Major Williams. "I'm a reconnaissance sergeant. I want to be with my unit." "Your unit doesn't need you, Sergeant. The entire Army needs you." Williams pauses. "You've done more for this campaign than most generals." Culin doesn't feel like a hero. He feels like a mechanic who got lucky. But the awards come anyway. Legion of Merit, Bronze Star, promotion to Technical Sergeant. Newspaper reporters want interviews. The genius mechanic who saved the invasion. The sergeant who outsmarted the Germans. From New Jersey to Normandy, one man's invention changed the war. Culin refuses most of them. "I just welded some metal to a tank," he says. "Anybody could have done it." But that's not true. Thousands of men saw the hedgerow problem. Hundreds of officers. Dozens of engineers. Only Curtis Culin saw the solution. The rhino's impact extends far beyond the bocage. As Allied forces push across France, tank crews discover other uses for the prongs. In urban warfare, they're perfect for smashing through brick walls. Crews use them to breach buildings where German snipers have taken position. During river crossings, the prongs provide extra traction on muddy banks. In the Ardennes, during the Battle of the Bulge, they push aside roadblocks made of felled trees. One report describes a Sherman using its rhino prongs to literally shove a disabled German Panther tank out of a narrow road. The hedgerow cutter, an engineering assessment concludes, has proven to be the most versatile field modification of the war. And it cost almost nothing. The steel was free, scavenged from enemy obstacles. The labor was minimal. 2 men could install a rhino kit in 4 hours. The design required no special parts, no complex engineering, no supply chain, just steel, welding equipment, common sense. Military analysts later estimate that the rhino shortened the Normandy campaign by 2 to 3 weeks. 2 weeks. That doesn't sound like much, but in war, weeks matter. 2 weeks meant thousands of lives saved, millions of gallons of fuel conserved, countless tons of ammunition not expended. 2 weeks meant the difference between liberating Paris in August 1944 versus October 1944. The ripple effects are incalculable, and it all started because one sergeant looked at a problem and thought, there has to be a simpler way. Curtis Culin returns to the United States in late 1945. The war is over. The parades are done. The victory celebrations fade. He goes back to Cranford, New Jersey, back to his old job, fixing cars and trucks. The men who bring their vehicles in have no idea they're dealing with a war hero. Curtis never mentions it. When people ask about his service, he shrugs. "I was a mechanic, fixed tanks. Nothing special. The medals sit in a drawer, the newspaper clippings yellow and are forgotten." His wife, Margaret, asks him once why he never talks about the hedgerow cutter. "Because," he says, "it was just a solution to a problem. I'm glad it worked, but I'd rather think about what I'm building now than what I built then." For Curtis Culin, the war is something to move past, not something to dwell on. He did his part, fixed a problem, saved some lives. That's enough. In 1963, Curtis G. Culin Jr. dies quietly. Heart attack. Quick. Painless. The local newspaper runs a short obituary. Mechanic, veteran,
survived by his wife and 2 children. No mention of the hedgerow cutter, no mention of the thousands of lives saved, no mention of the invention that changed World War II. Most of his neighbors never know. But in military museums across America and Europe, examples of the Culin hedgerow cutter are preserved. Chunks of welded steel. Crude, simple, revolutionary. Sherman tanks with steel tusks jutting from their fronts. Rhinos. The plaques explain what they are, what they did. And occasionally, they mention a name. Sergeant Curtis G. Culin, Jr., the mechanic who saved D-Day with scrap metal and a welding torch. The man who proved that the best solutions are often the simplest. The soldier who changed the war by refusing to accept that problems were insolvable. There's a lesson in Curtis Culin's story, not about war, not about tanks, about problem solving. When you face an impossible obstacle, you have 2 choices. You can throw resources at it, design elaborate solutions, wait for experts to develop sophisticated fixes. Or you can look at the problem differently. Ask, what if we're approaching this wrong? What if the solution is simpler than we think? The hedgerows weren't beaten by new technology or superior firepower. They were beaten by a sergeant who asked, why are we trying to go over them when we should go through them? That one question changed everything. Because sometimes the difference between failure and success isn't how hard you try. It's whether you're asking the right question. Curtis Culin asked the right question, built the right solution, changed the war. Then he went back to fixing cars. Because for him, it was never about glory, never about recognition. It was just about solving the problem in front of him, and doing it the simplest way possible. Remember the name, Curtis Culin, the man who proved that genius isn't always complicated. Sometimes it's just a guy with a welding torch who refuses to accept that problems can't be solved. This story is based on verified historical records from the U.S. Army Historical Division, the National World War II Museum, and contemporary after-action reports from the Normandy campaign. Curtis G. Culin, Jr. was a real person. The hedgerow cutter was a real invention. Every fact in this story is documented.